Hi, welcome to the fourth video in the Integrated Strategy Execution video series. In this video, we're going to look at one of the two tactics that I'm going to prescribe to help you to move your organization up the maturity curve. So obviously in the first video we understood basically, what's the challenges organizations have with execution. The second video we focused on the secrets of some of the best performing organizations. In the third video we kind of sketched out the maturity model as a way of understanding the journey. What I'd like to do in this video is sort of help you understand one of the strategies that you can take to essentially give the business the ability to manage the daily operations. Because if you think of strategy execution, it's really got two parts. It's got strategy definition and deployment, the transformation, if you like, business, running the business and improving the business, and transforming and changing the business. Those are the two aspects that we have to be able to manage. We have to be able to do it effectively and ambidextrously. We have to be able to do both at the same time. So if you want to be able to do the strategy execution, the foundation is daily management. And for me, the critical idea kind of was a big aha moment was when I first ran into a concept. Obviously the Deming cycle of plan, do, check, act was something I was aware of, but the first time I ran into a concept of MAR charts. And that was a moment when I suddenly realized that you could change the whole way an organization operates and the degree of focus and the structure of problem solving if you think about changing the way people review performance. So, classically, and I don't want to make a caricature, but if you think about any given traditional organization, there's an activity which we go through to review performance, every time we get a meeting together. And if this is a meeting cycle, and this is the traditional view of the world, then at the heart of that meeting, the first thing we do is we identify and effectively we review our actions that we've done, and before the meeting, what we're desperately trying to do is actually do the actions, and then before coming out of the meeting, we effectively what do? We actually identify the actions we're going to do. So this is classically the performance management cycle. But let me tell you how this operates in most companies, or at least most of the companies that I've worked with in the past. What happens is we're coming up to our operational management meeting, and suddenly we remember actually next week or tomorrow I've got to go and give an update on the progress of my function or department or my operation, and I frantically look for the minutes from the last meeting. So what are the actions I should have done? And then we actually get into the meeting, and this thing that happens is we say, okay, well, how are you doing? How is your group doing? And everybody gives an anecdotal summary with what I would say largely, aggregate information, lagging information about what's happened. And when they look at performance, they're focusing very much on the outcomes rather than understanding, well, what's happened. And then when issues are identified, there's a lot of kind of gut feel analysis, typically by the manager of the group, influenced by some of the people around the table, which leads to another set of minutes about the actions that are going to be done. And then we breathe a sigh of relief, we get out of the meeting, we get back to the day job, and we do the things we need to do, back into the mealy, the whirlwind, and all of a sudden, it's almost, time goes very quickly, and we're back in the beginning of the next meeting. It's obviously a caricature, but that's how a lot of organizations, run management meetings and review meetings. But it could be different. Imagine a scenario where when we went into every meeting, versus a more the new way of thinking about this. Imagine a scenario where we went into the meeting and we basically all have a simple and easy visual way of understanding what are the things that we are trying to improve, the measures of performance that are meaningful for our operation, and what is it that we're trying to do to improve that by thoughtfully understanding the causes of underperformance, and then understanding whether we've actually done those things and what's the next. And we all had a consistent format to do that. Well, the aha moment for me was when somebody actually from Ford showed me a concept that they'd used called a MAR chart. So what is a MAR chart? Well, what a MAR chart is is basically a four-quadrant chart that has effectively a quadrant for measure, a quadrant for analyze, a quadrant for action, and a quadrant for review. And what I love about this approach is a lot of organizations, when they first introduce continuous improvement ideas or process improvement, they get stuck on all the technology around, the different tools and Six Sigma and Lean and all the Japanese concepts around the terminology. And what they kind of miss is that can be overwhelming to people. And another approach is to say, well, let's not focus on the tools and the process of improvement or the methods. Let's focus on understanding what it is we want to improve. And if you imagine that rather than deploying your valuable continuous improvement practitioners, technically your green and black and all the people that have gone through this kind of training, and instead of deploying them into running projects, imagine you deploy them into coaching management teams. And through a process of asking yourself the question, well, how do we want to measure this particular operation? Well, typically what happens is that we have a kind of driver tree analysis in any part of the organization. The things we may be measuring are outcomes, productivity, backlogs, that kind of thing. But what we have to do is we have to ask ourselves, well, what is it process-wise within our operation that is the drivers of those outcomes? And that first piece of analysis leads to the identification, typically, of half a dozen or so leading KPIs, which, if you like, are the drivers of the outcomes of the organization. And what we want to do is we want to give each of those KPIs at least one KPI per member of management team. And rather than them having just ones that align to their functional part, the idea is a KPI that spans the full width of the operation that they're part of the management team for. And what we want to do with that is basically simply, over a period of several months, implement this concept, which is the MAR chart. And what I love about a MAR chart is that I can teach a MAR chart to a manager in a matter of minutes, because it's very simple. Basically, I say, okay, now within a given period, every month, I want you to measure some KPI, whatever that KPI is, every single instance of that KPI. Now, typically we like to look at things in monthly basis, monthly averages. Well, no, we're not talking about that here. We're talking about if, for example, the organization produces some, let's say it's a finance group, and they're trying to measure, how long it takes to pay every bill that effectively, that's been presented in terms of, a creditor. And what we, or even collect cash from a debtor, whatever it happens to be. And this is in days, and this is every single bill, how long it took to either receive the money or pay the money, whatever happens to be the goal. And let's assume it's to get the money in quicker, and we have a target, which is relative. This is the number of days relative to its, let's say its agreed terms. And what we want to understand is, what's the reason we have for not to, in fact, if this was the other way around, what's the gap between those two numbers? And what we want in the analysis section is for every one that is, missing the target, what we want to understand is why. So in a sense, the same resource that helped them work through the driver tree can then spend some time with the team understanding, or the individual, if you like, that owns the measure, understanding the failure modes that lead to whatever the gap is that's between the measure and the target. And of course, I recognize that this is, potentially mixing special cause and common cause variation for those who understand those concepts. But at the end of the day, the power of it is, what we want to be able to do is understand, on a simple Pareto basis, what are the primary reasons for, in this case, delay in payment or whatever it happens to be. And in this particular case, what we want to then say is, we want to work on this. We want to work on the A. And simply put, we want to identify actions that help us, again, by thinking about, simply in a sort of 5 whys basis, effectively, what's the cause of this particular reason why we're underperforming or not meeting our performance. And that allows us to create a list of actions to focus on cause A, and this is action 1, and action 2, and then who, and then effectively who are the people who are going to do that, and when are they going to do it by, effectively. And what we're doing is we're building effectively an inventory of actions. Now those actions may just simply be, effectively a just do it, or they might require themselves the application of methods of tools, lean processes, looking at variation reduction, whatever happens to be, implementation of technology, whatever they happen to be, those actions are the focus to move that particular cause, which ultimately will move that dial. And then the review component simply looks at understanding over the period of time, January, February, March, April, as we go through the year, how many instances there are of that particular root cause. And if when we get to 0, in other words, we've eliminated that particular root cause, we can then move on to the next root cause until we get to a point where we're perfectly happy that the process is meeting the needs of the customer, and as in the customer of that operation. So, in recap, if we think about daily management, if we think about the idea of how do we take the run and improve the business and make that something that every leadership team, rather than having a dedicated improvement team, we can actually get the accountability and ownership for process improvement in the line organization. Well, one of the best tactics you can take is to take the plan, do, check, act concept and use a concept of MAR so that each manager owns a MAR chart. And then suddenly these meetings change. Effectively, when we come into the meeting, we know what the actions are, we know what the common format for reviewing performance, identification of actions is given structure and thought in terms of root cause analysis, and then the execution of the actions, that's when again the coach comes in. So rather than have a team of people who run projects and improvement professionals, if you want to move forward and build the foundation for strategy execution, you want to allow that team to become the coaches to your management team. Effectively, rather, the whole adage here is, as a choice, we can either do things for people or teach them to do things for themselves. Give a man a fish or teach people to fish. And this is the foundation of letting the business manage to run the business and improve the business and create focus for executing the strategy. Thanks very much. I look forward to the next video.